Welcome to the Tools for the Modern Man podcast. I'm your host, Pete Beskus. Today, we're diving into strengths. So I guess we start with what are strengths? And the way that I like to define strengths are, it's your natural aptitude. They're the things that you're good at naturally, the things that you gravitate towards. For me, I remember being in school and I always gravitated towards math and sciences. And for me, those really were my strengths. I leveraged those, I leaned into those. And on the flip side, I let some of my weaknesses, quote unquote, lag behind because I didn't see the point in developing weaknesses. I only saw the point in leaning into my strengths. As I got older, I started to realize that we are comprised of a balance of these strengths and not strengths. I don't even call them weaknesses anymore. I think they're just things that you don't have in your arsenal. But I like to segregate them from what skills are. So for example, I might have had an aptitude for math, but math is a skill. It's not a strength. And a strength that I had was logic. Being able to solve a linear problem was my strength. It just was way more apparent when I was in math class. So you get to the modern world, and I believe anyone who's been in the corporate sector has taken a personality test or a strengths assessment, and maybe you haven't. I think most of them are quite weak. The Myers-Briggs, the ETJNF, all of those ones. I think they really try to simplify what strengths are for people and don't do a really good job of making it clear of how to use those strengths. How do you apply them? What are they? When do they show up? How are they working for you? And how are they working against you? So, as I mentioned earlier, strengths are really just what is your aptitude for something and how you approach whatever solution you have going forward. Strengths you can build on, but I never believe that you can take something that you're not inherently good at and make it comparable to something you're strong at, which is why I think you're here all the time, lean into your strengths, and then look for your gaps and fill those gaps with people who can help you. That's the best advice you're ever going to get, is really focus on doing the things that you could do really well and backfill and find support for the areas you don't. You can spend years and years and years trying to fix those areas and you're never going to be good at it. It's the same as if you're born right-handed. Yes, you can learn to proficiently write with your left hand, but it's never going to be as good and as easy and as effortless as writing with your right. And that's really the approach that I take with strengths. One of my favorite tools in assessing strengths is brought out by Gallup, and it's called the Clifton Strengths. And I took this a few years back as part of a leadership course, and I loved it. I just thought, this sings to me. There are 32 or 34 categories, 32 qualities, strengths, and they're all strengths. But each person, when they take this assessment, will get their top 5. And their top 5 are unique. They're like an individual fingerprint. And what's nice about them is they will fall into a few categories. They're going to fall into like the 4 overarching categories of communication, relationships, strength, action, I think strategic. And then underneath those are sub-qualities, sub-strengths. And then you see how those all fall together to support you. So if you're strong at vision, right, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 other strengths that help to balance that out, which is how and why you've gotten to where you've gotten to today. When you get the detailed analysis, there are all these other ones that kind of populate in. You can see what your top ones are and you can see what your bottom ones are. What's really eye-opening about that, what I find very great about having that as a tool, is that when you can see the lower part of your strengths, those now are the areas that you can go get support with. And I'm a big believer in finding the right team and putting the people around you that will help you succeed. Putting yourself in a room with like-minded individuals is always great, but sometimes we can balance ourselves better if we have a group of diversity and a group with different ideas that will challenge us. Because if you're only in a room where you're hearing the same message over and over again, there's no room for growth there, right? Everybody has all the answers, my way's the right way, And again, that's where some of those strengths and weaknesses come in. Can you sit in a room and be challenged, right? Is that one of your strengths, or is that something that falls a little bit lower? So it's really interesting, and I think that once you've defined kind of your core values and really where you want to go in your life with your vision, strengths is really that next piece, because now you're going to start putting together your toolbox on how to get there. And you need to know which tools you can use and how you're going to use them. So strengths is really just about, again, if you're trying to build a house, could be an analogy like that, you might be the architect. You might be the one who sits there and works with the plans, works with the designer, puts all the people in place. But is your strength pouring foundation? Is your strength building the walls, framing? Is your strength electrical? Is it plumbing? No. If those aren't your strengths, if those aren't your aptitudes, you're going to backfill it with other people. Now, you might have some of those strengths and you might choose to do those things. That's great. But if you don't and you're not aware of it, just like the analogy of building a house, if you don't go and identify what your strengths are and where you're missing some things, you're going to start with a design. It's probably not going to be very good design. You're going to start building. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to have to go back to the design, try again, go back to the design. That's great for entrepreneurialism. That's terrible for trying to create your vision if you're doing it all by yourself. And again, as being a proponent of coaching, this is where I always think that having a mentor, having a guide to help get you to identify those strengths, quiz you on those strengths, and kind of put you in the position to succeed with those strengths is so valuable. Like, it's invaluable. Next week, I'm going to have a special guest on who's going to be going through my Clifton Strengths and highlighting how they show up with the work that I do, but also bring up some of the other things, because for the other side of the coin, for every strength, there is a weakness. So for every strength, it is a double-edged sword. It gives you positives, but it also shows up as negatives. So it's a really interesting conversation. It really builds upon what I'm talking about here. But to kind of summarize it for you, the audience, is go assess your core values. Create a vision that is something that you really want to work towards. And then have an honest look of what you're doing really well and what are the things that you need support with or to improve upon. So what is a strength? If you're lacking a certain strength, finding someone to support you in that avenue who has those strengths. And remember, strengths are different than skills. Skills you can acquire, but strengths are innate to your personality, just like your fingerprint. That's all I have today. I really hope that you enjoyed this one. I'm looking forward to next week, where you're going to see these skills be scrutinized in real time. I really hope you enjoy that as well. Tune in next week. And as always, if you like this podcast, share it with a friend, drop a review, and have a great week. Talk to y'all soon.